Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 158. As always, I shall attempt to start us off with a tune.
Up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need, to wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wild. Your new God's sullen peoples have to abide, to veil the threats of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made and work another gain. Take savage war. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. When your goal is nearest, the end for others sought. What's love that heed and folly bring all it? Take up the white man's wing, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living God. The white man's burden, the blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye.
Oh, there he goes. Hey, he's back. Yeah, that isn't working. Anyone else there? Is it just me? Duke? This is a weekly round of Boomer Tech.
Is Profile Picture even coming up?
Playing, gents. Was that
No,
playing,
there's
gents?
no sound on the second half after you disconnect it. No. and you're very quiet.
Disconnect. I don't know what happened there, guys. I have actually spent some time trying to sort this out, but I'm beginning to think that I'm just going to abandon playing music on these streams until I can get a new computer. Anyway, welcome to my guests, Atman and Mitch. How are you going today, gents?
Yeah, good.
How are you going today, Mitch?
Same old, same old.
I only asked you so you say that. So,
Duke, are you really quiet for? Is he really quiet to you, Mitch?
Yeah, same.
my sound not very loud.
Yeah, you're very, very quiet.
I think I might know what's doing that. Let's see. No, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. This was probably a result of me messing around with my settings earlier, and I'm not sure what I can do about it now. Is it like so quiet that people can't hear me?
You are very quiet.
Very quiet. Oh, good. I should have guessed, shouldn't I? Okay. Is that any better?
Maybe a tiny bit.
Just a tiny bit. Okay, because that was the only thing I changed.
Huh.
Oh, wait a minute. Is that better?
A little bit. Keep say something again.
Is that better now?
A small bit, yeah.
All right, well, that's probably as good as I'm going to get it, to be honest with you. I don't know what else I can do with that, to be honest. I don't think that's going to improve anything, is it?
That's louder, but a bit tinny.
A bit tinny. Okay. That is a new thing. How's that?
Yeah, much better.
All right. Well, there we go. That's what we're going to do.
Are you lost down a tunnel? It does sound a little bit like you were lost down a tunnel.
Is it better now,
Yeah, a bit. I don't know what's happened to your mic. It's a bit. Yeah, quite tinny, but you are louder. So
I don't understand why it's tinny, to be honest with you. There's no particular reason for it to be so. They've added a couple of new things on StreamYards. I don't know if that's got anything to do with it.
Shouldn't be.
But it's pretty much as loud as I can get it, I think, at the moment. Don't see what else I can do about it, to be honest. By the looks of it. I have no idea what that's even about. Not one. How's that? Is that any better?
Yeah, that'll do.
All right, because that's probably all I can do, to be honest. I often get annoyed when I'm watching streams when everyone in the chat is saying, "Oh, that sounds terrible. That sounds terrible," and in fact, I can hear the person perfectly all right. But maybe there's something minor not right about it. But anyway, not to worry. Enough boom attack for one evening, or one morning. In my case, we're supposed to have. I think it's 87 degrees later on. Today.
God, that's
hottest day of the year
inhumane.
so far. That's the hottest day of the year so far.
Bloody climate change.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's just normal Australian summer, basically. I mean, we get, I suppose, half a dozen days a year when it's like 90 or something over that. Sometimes, occasionally up to 100. But you 5 or 6 days a year where I live.
I mean, if it goes over like 18.5 degrees Celsius, I get sunstroke. So probably best if I stay away from the dark southern continent.
Oh, as I say, we only get a few days a year like that, mate. It was 60 odd a couple of days ago. It was like not even British summer weather. few days ago. It was 67 or 68, something like that. I still use old money, by the way. And it is a dry heat. Michael K, 19th century fan in the chat. Yes, it is. When it gets hot here, it's a very dry heat because it comes out of the outback. So it's very dry when we get that. I don't mind heat, to be honest with you. It's like I'm not all that keen on cold. My father always said I was a total freeze-ass. There we go. Adam, did you have a first subject that you wanted to bring up this week?
Only really this manhunt story.
Yes, I think that's an interesting one. You mentioned that on the Discord, and I think we should address it. So, since you've been following it, would you like to just give a brief view of what's gone on? Because some people in the chat may not know, particularly if they're not British.
Well, I wasn't sure if I wanted to bring it up because it's very early. There's so many details we don't yet know. But basically, this guy Abdul Azidi, this is still an ongoing manhunt. But basically, this guy Abdul Azidi is believed to have travelled from where he was living in Newcastle to. And we'll get onto that in a second. To London, to Clapham Common, I should say, and where he threw a corrosive substance, which obviously in most cases we would call an acid attack, but some authorities are treating as a chemical weapons attack. It's
and
not.
This was over a mother and 2 girls, wasn't it? Yes,
and three police officers were also badly wounded.
And he got away. He got away from them.
Yeah. It was 9 people in total that he's injured. I'm not sure if they're including him in that as well because he was injured too.
Good.
But, I thought his eye was missing because that was the way it was beforehand.
Right. I thought he injured himself in the attack anyway.
I don't know. I mean, you'd think, given that his eye is so. What's the word? So easily profilable, I suppose you could say. You'd think they'd be able to catch him in the space of a few minutes because they've also got CCTV. I mean, I don't give away with CCTV cameras being a load of shit, to be honest. But
Britain and especially London has got more CCTV cameras than almost anywhere in the world.
Well, this is kind of the thing that got me is that, we're the most surveilled nation in the world, and yet they didn't release a picture of him or even really a good description of him until 11 o'clock the next morning.
Well, if it had been a white guy, they would have done that, Adam. If it had been a white guy, you would have known it was a white guy immediately. Every time they don't say it's a white guy, I just assume it's.
I mean, to be honest, I'm surprised we didn't get a bunch of shit-led pundits coming out of the woodwork to claim it was a white guy before the picture came out, because that's usually what they do.
Yeah, what is it like? Was it? Or he might be. His skin might be non-white, but his soul, or is it, or something like that, is white.
Yeah.
They
believe in souls all of a sudden.
Just trying to get out.
Spiritually white. But I mean, acid attacks generally is something where they didn't record much in the way of acid attack information on acid attacks before 2012. It's become quite a serious problem. That you saw a lot of outlets, especially funny enough, there was a lot of outlets during lockdown who were going around proudly proclaiming that actually we shouldn't care about acid attacks because they're on a steep decline. I mean, I imagine lockdowns had something to do with that, but there's more acid attacks now than ever. In fact, from I think in 2021, if I'm getting this information right, let me just double check my stats. I did write these down.
It's worth noting, in Pakistan, acid attacks are very common. I mean, especially when, let's say, blokes get rejected by a bird or whatever.
Yeah, I was just going to say it is part of the culture of that part of the world, isn't it? Which has been imported into Britain. Obviously.
Well, this is actually the funny thing is that I was looking at acid attacks in other countries, and I was trying to look at Muslim countries. We brought up Tommy Robinson last week, right? This is one of the other few things that Tommy Robinson does really get right, is that I remember seeing a clip of him several years ago where he was pointing to the particular areas of London where acid attacks were most prominent. And indeed, if you then go and look at the demographic makeup of those areas, they're all either Bangladeshi or Pakistani. And I looked at Saudi Arabia, funnily enough, and Saudi Arabia has acid attacks, but again, it was another one where they're almost all notably done by foreigners, like specifically Pakistanis and Bangladeshis that have come over to Saudi Arabia as like they're sort of like foreign labor workforce that they employ.
That's
which
right.
I thought was just...
They take them into Saudi Arabia as foreign laborers, basically. Yeah.
Yes. And I found that so bizarre. And of course, it's quite bleak when you consider that these are like Bangladeshis and Pakistanis make up enormous amounts of our entire, immigration diasporas. But
yeah, I don't
so
think
like
in
2021,
I don't think it's a common thing in the rest of the Muslim world. I think it's just Pakistan and Bangladesh that it's very common.
But it's like in 2021, in England and Wales, there were 421 acid attacks recorded. A year later, in 2022, there were 710.
Is there any evidence on the demographics of the victims of these attacks, Alan?
It's a bit of a mix. Like usually, it's within the communities.
I was going to say, because that's what one would expect, is that it would be Pakistanis and Bangladeshi people doing it to other Pakistanis and Bangladeshis. I mean, was that the case in this case, or have they not released that information at all?
I don't think we know that information. I had a look, I couldn't see anything. But indeed, it's often it can be quite a mix. Like there was one particular case of a Romanian man that was acid attacked here in the UK by his girlfriend.
Wow.
I don't think she was Romanian, but I'm not sure if she was. I don't think she was Bangladeshi or Pakistani either. But there have been instances of even a few quite prominent ones of like Pakistani men who've had like a white girlfriend and they've acid attacked them later.
Yeah, I know that's happened. Dortastic Draco makes what I think is probably a good point. There's also been copycatting by other populations in London within the last few years. But again, other diverse populations, not Anglo-Celtic people, obviously, because there's no history of Anglo-Celtic people ever doing stuff like that.
Yeah, it's not usually like, I mean, I'm sure I could probably find a case.
Wouldn't be. Yeah, you might find one, but you'd be lucky.
Yeah.
It's certainly not a British thing at all. Yeah.
But I think it's I'm just trying to find this other thing. Like another thing, of course, is like this guy was like there's a lot of people coming out of the woodwork, including a lot of these like self-proclaimed feminists coming out of the woodwork to like claim that this is actually just a case of misogyny and it's got nothing to do with him being of migrant stock or I mean, you remember they did this, we covered the that horrific stabbing in Ireland a while back. And they were trying to bring up that guy that guy's immigration status meant nothing because he'd been there 20 years. And to be honest, to me, that just rings completely hollow, because that means that integration just does not work. That someone can be there 20 years and still jump to an attack that you would see amongst migrant populations generally.
Well, look at the case, Armin, of the guy who's just been put into a mental health institution. Was it in Nottingham, where he killed 3 people or something?
Yes, yeah.
Another case had lived in the UK for a long time. Didn't make him part. Didn't mean that he'd somehow assimilated into the UK population. He hadn't.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
it's
you know,
like,
this guy was even on the radar of the British security services. And as so often, they lost track of him.
Yeah. I'm struggling to find it now, but I had but anyway, basically, so this guy, I found it. This guy was on got in on his third attempt at asylum. After quite some time. In all of that time that he was here, he was housed at cost to a basically a charity called Action Foundation. They've actually released an official statement about him, saying that they supported him with rental properties through their Action Letting project for refugees. This is a group where I don't think they actually accept any formal donations. They may do, but it's not exactly a prominent part of their financial model. They almost entirely.
I don't know if this is the same case, but persona non grata in the chat is saying he was convicted in 2018 of sexual assault and still given asylum at the third attempt.
Yeah. Yeah, he was given asylum after being accused of that. After being,
I'm sorry, if you do that, that should be like, nah, sorry, go.
Well, this is the thing. So the Tory government, a little bit of a sidetrack, but the Tory government constantly say they have to remove the ECHR to be able to do this. This is actually already on the books. Blair, like the only good thing he ever did was the 2007 Borders Act, which means that if a foreign national commits a crime on British soil, the British government is liable to deport them. They have to deport them.
Anybody who commits anything except a very minor crime, who is trying to get asylum, anybody, I don't care if it's not personal assault and stuff. If you commit any sort of very minor crime, you should just be gone. That's it. No chance.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. But that's like, this is the thing, like he could already be, and indeed this was something that came up with the Nottingham guy, with the Nottingham attacker. The police, he was wanted for a previous case. He hadn't shown up to court. There was an arrest warrant out for him. And the police admitted that they didn't really pursue him with any sort of meaningful degree, because they just said nothing would have happened. It wouldn't have meant anything. And of course they know
there are all these NGOs and so-called human rights lawyers associated with NGOs, etc., who will all deal with this stuff. And I think even what are those morons called who go and help the migrants in Calais? Those guys give these people cards with the phone numbers of so-called human rights lawyers in, and all this bullshit.
So before I should go into this Action Foundation thing, I should also bring up another thing that I almost completely forgot about for a second there, which was that this guy, similar to a previous case of that man that tried to blow up the hospital in Liverpool, this guy had his asylum claim basically heavily supported by the fact that a priest had claimed he'd converted to Christianity.
Was this Church of England or
yeah, I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was an Anglican institution. But of course, well, I mean, I think the Liverpool one was a Catholic one, but they're basically all doing the same stuff now.
They're all POS, yeah. They're all, well, when I say they're all POS, they've all got POS elements within them. There are good Catholic priests. There are some good, particularly high church Anglicans, and obviously there are good various other denominations. But there's an awful lot of woke morons within the Christian churches these days.
But so the thing with the like there have been, I've seen things coming out of this where they've said that like some priests some vicars are quite busy with like non-stop baptisms. I mean, you have to kind of wonder whether these people are just entirely dishonest, or if they are really that gullible that they actually think that people have come to what has become one of the most godless secular societies in the world and suddenly found themselves
convert.
Convert.
And yet he carries on doing acid attacks, which is most definitely not a Christian thing at all. It's a Muslim thing from certain parts of the world.
And of course the church will throw vicars under the bus over sexual assault allegations with, you know, basically next to no proof. I'm thinking of like George Bell, for example. But they will defend to the death a vicar that has baptized, you know, 10 jihadis that week. You know, it's
ridiculous.
yeah. But of course, this group that this guy was getting support from, Action Foundation, you know, they get you know, they get money from the government. I'm looking at their records now. They get total gross income. They got income from government contracts 200,000 in 2019, tax year end in 2019, 300,000 tax year end in 2020.
Adam, let's remember that is ordinary British taxpayers' money, which is
that's not even the only source of government funds they get. That's just pure government contracts. Total gross income put together is between 1 and 2 million, depending on which year you're looking at.
And a lot of that is taxpayers' money, is it?
Yeah, it would all be.
Oh, for God's sake.
And it's like there was a thing.
There's no oversight of this. There's nothing. It's just all.
Well, I think the government have oversight. They know exactly what these organisations do, you know, and they still support them. You know, we talked. Was it last week about, or maybe the week before, about the that guy in Southend receiving, you know, £500,000 of council money to run a fucking Facebook page. You know, they know what they're giving money to, and you know, the thing is that if you look at, for example, like there was a thing a while ago. There was, do you remember when Farage was on LBC and he had this segment called like Phone Farage or something? I'm sure there was a thing a while back where he had a guy from HMRC ring in who worked for like Border Force basically. And the guy was saying that like they will get a case file dropped on their desk that morning, which was like a court case they had to show up for that afternoon to basically argue the toss about why this guy should be deported or that guy or whatever.
So and he would say they'd little notice. Why did they get so little notice?
Well, this is the thing. So they don't get much notice. They're going in against legal teams that have had weeks to prepare. They're working on so little information, this, that, and the other. And like, you know, did that guy even realize? Do most of them even realize that these teams of lawyers they're up against on the other end are actually paid for by the government? You know, the government is essentially funding both sides in these legal cases, hamstringing one side quite deliberately.
To me, Adam, it is perfectly obvious that what is happening with the illegal immigration coming across the channel on the dinghies and all the rest of it is the British equivalent of what's going on on the American southern border. It's being done deliberately by the government. They want these people to come in, and they are basically doing nothing whatsoever to stop them because they don't want to stop them.
Yeah.
For me, it's the dinghy situation, and let's be honest, the legal immigration is a bigger problem. There are far more legal immigrants coming into Britain from the third world than there are across the English Channel. But the situation of these illegal immigrants coming across on dinghies, it is exactly the same situation that you see in the USA at the moment, where the Biden administration is fighting against Texas. Texas wants to stop these people coming in. Biden wants to allow them to come in. And Sunak is exactly the same as Biden, even though he's supposedly, in air quotes, a conservative. And don't get me wrong, Keir Starmer will be at least as bad. Anyone who thinks he won't be at least as bad is a moron, in my opinion. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on it. I just think it's the same thing, and it's on a smaller scale than what's happening on the southern border of the USA. But, you know, Britain's a hell of a lot smaller country with a hell of a lot smaller population.
Yeah.
So, you know, I will just say to people in the chat, guys, we are in a US election year, and YouTube is going to get stricter and stricter. So please don't post in the chat, all right? Please don't. Because YouTube is just looking for excuses to get rid of channels like this.
Yeah, it's like I don't even. I mean, there's this one video that is on YouTube by now. Like it's like 4 hours of like British army marches, like Scotland the Brave, British Grenadiers. Obviously, it's like a 4-hour compilation. It just keeps getting shut down by YouTube every time it comes up. Very mundane. Like it's just British army marches for 4 hours.
Yeah, so normally conservative stuff, basically.
It's not even that. I mean, it's not even political to begin with. It's just heritage.
Yeah. It's just traditional, yeah, exactly. But they don't even like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, the American marches are allowed to be on there. I mean, the original channel got struck down anyway because of British Army marches. But the American marches, that's also a 4-hour compilation, doesn't get struck down as much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, like I said, and I'm not the first person to say this in our sphere, but, you know, because we're in a US election year, I just think we're going to get a lot more censorship this year, and it's going to ramp up as we get closer to the US presidential election. And it's, you know, it's there for a purpose. It's there because YouTube has a political viewpoint that they support. That's why, despite everything we try to do on a channel like this, it grows at a snail pace because YouTube will not give it any sort of publicity whatsoever, this channel, you know. I've had 2 strikes and I've been very lucky. One of them I won and the other one I got downgraded. But I've had
Patrick
2 strikes.
Casey had his channel taken down.
Say we were the most. Yeah, I was going to talk about that later on in the stream, actually, Armin. But yes, he did, and he's by no means what I would describe as an extremist.
No.
Oh, he was a Francis fanboy.
He did have, to be fair, he did get a big hit piece by Media Matters, which is a big lefty thing. He did get a big hit piece about him on there, where they claimed he was at Charlottesville and what have you, and I have no idea if he was or he wasn't. But I mean, certainly
I don't think he was.
YouTube content was his YouTube content was fairly milquetoast, to be honest.
Well, I mean, he was like a moderate Fuentes fanboy. That's essentially his just. I mean,
did he like Fuentes?
Like he used to be like in the Fuentes crowd years back.
Yeah, years ago. But I thought he'd moved away from the Fuentes, Mitch.
Yeah, it's like you're talking like 2 years ago, I think, when he dropped out of the Fuentes circle and just tried to do his own thing.
Jobo in the chat is saying, have we touched on C of E's complicity in this? And yeah, Jobo, Adam just did actually talk about that. So yes,
yeah, probably not enough. I mean, it's a big old rabbit hole, and I don't really know. But I mean, I did do a thing looking at, you know, just privately. I was looking at a few things like a couple of weeks ago about NGOs that were refugee organizations that were explicitly run from the church. So yeah, it's a pretty shitty old thing. That said, I mean, my local vicar got an imam into the church on Sunday service to give a talk to us all about diversity of faith. So,
did the imam allow your local vicar to go to his mosque on a Friday?
No, obviously not. Never.
No. Then to me, that is cucking. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The only
100%.
way that a Christian vicar should do that is, I'd say if I was a Christian vicar, and I'm not even a Christian, to be honest, I'm an agnostic. But if I was, I'd say, well, yeah, you can come into my church on a Sunday so long as I can go to your mosque on a Friday, but not otherwise.
Yeah.
That should be the Christian attitude, in my view. I mean, you know, if you're a believing Christian, then by all means say, okay, you can come into my church on a Sunday, but only if I can go to your mosque on a Friday. But of course, the thing is, if that happened, you'd have all sorts of possibilities of the British police going and arresting the vicar. Because if you do anything outside a mosque and you're an Anglo-Celtic person, you're very liable to be arrested. Whereas if you're a Muslim doing something outside a Christian church, or even vandalizing a Christian church, you're very liable to get away with it. This is just a fact of modern Britain and its 2-tier policing system.
Yeah,
where the individuals who are Anglo-Celtic, real British people, in my humble opinion, are far more liable to be arrested than the diversity types are. far more likely. I mean, you can walk around the middle of London with a Union Jack. Cops are very liable to arrest you. You want to walk around the middle of London with all sorts of other flags, be they Palestinian flags or Israeli flags or whatever flag you get a name that isn't the Union Jack or the Cross of St. George. Cops will never arrest you almost.
Yeah.
So, I mean, someone pointed out earlier on in the chat about, what's his name? Sam Melia, I think. The chap who is facing a prison sentence for putting out very milquetoast stickers like, it's okay to be white, for God's sake, which, how is that bad?
Well, reject white guilt, all the others. I did a little write-up on it on the Discord, didn't I? But
you did, mate, you did. And like, none of them were extremist in any way, shape, or form, white supremacy things. They were just saying it's okay to be white, which, as far as I'm concerned, it definitely is. I mean, if it's not okay to be white, surely that would be racist and hate speech, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, the reason that campaign was quite effective was because it was outing those people as being sort of perennially online, because they, of course, knew that there was more behind it than meets the eye, but most regular people just didn't see that. They just saw it as an innocuous statement. And it worked quite well to out those people for being what they are, which is also kind of why this sort of mass takeover of Twitter has actually been sort of semi-effective without anyone really having to do anything. It's just because these people kind of existed purely in this online space, and now we're just, literally rocking up in their mentions all day long. They're sitting there screaming about how we've taken over the platform. We haven't. There's still very few of us. The average like Black Power Twitter like Hotep delusional crap is still getting 10 times the amount of engagement that anything like anyone on the right would tweet would ever get. But we've carved out this tiny little corner for ourselves, and it's just enough to get their hackles up. But
it's immensely better than YouTube, Adam, and I got to say, I haven't been on. I haven't been using Twitter for all that long, but it's immensely better than YouTube. Like my Twitter following is growing a lot quicker than this channel is. Put it that way. So, and I don't even post much, compared to people who are perennially online. I might post, I don't know, half a dozen things in a day, maybe, and most of those will be reposts. But just to say to Richard Ford in the chat, Richard, I don't know what you're talking about when you say someone. Who am I not naming that you want me to name that you don't know as well as I do? I know who I'm talking about. So, it's YouTube, mate. Give me a break. You go and do your own channel, Richard, and then you see how long you last, mate. See how long you last, but we'll see. But when I talk about people, I talk about small hats. I talk about all sorts of other things. You brought up Sam. Oh, I see. It was you who brought up Sam Melia. I'm sorry, Richard. I didn't remember it was you. I beg your pardon. I don't pay total attention to the chat, mate, when I'm talking to my guests. But I brought up Sam Melia because I saw it in the chat, okay? Because it hasn't been a miscarriage of justice yet because he hasn't gone to court yet, but I strongly suspect it will be. He didn't do anything to deserve.
Wait, what was that?
Richard was saying he brought it up in chat, and I didn't realize it was Richard who brought it up.
No, after that. What did you say after that?
I think that, he hasn't gone to court yet, has he? He's got to go back for sentencing, I believe.
Oh, yeah, he's going back for sentencing, but he's been found guilty.
That's right. Yeah. And I believe, I hope that the sentencing is sensible and he doesn't do a day in jail, because he certainly shouldn't. But I would be surprised if that's what happens.
Well, they made an example out of what was that guy's name? The Longshanks guy.
Sven Longshanks?
Sven Longshanks, yeah, that's it. The Radio Albion guy.
Yep. Is that the guy who got 5 years?
He got some years, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. I'm not sure what the exact sentence was.
I mean,
but...
it's just disgusting. These people are being sent to jail for no crime.
Yeah, then you have like a
People
stellar figure who was in PA who, I mean, last I saw of him was he pranked Tom Harwood on like a live video, I think it was, or something. Like he pretty much did a prank on Tom Harwood, saying that, you know, Tom Harwood supports the white race and all this.
Yep. I mean, look, these people don't deserve to go to jail at all. That's my opinion. They just don't. There was no calling for any sort of violence or anything in anything Melia posted, as far as I understand. All he was doing was saying it's okay to be white. You know, we were never asked about mass immigration. We weren't. And when people are asked, they always say, no, we don't want it. And, you know, but yeah, somehow the far right are the great enemies, whereas people who go around doing acid attacks and all the rest of it are not. So, you know, I mean we can see this, but normies don't see it. And the thing is, like, YouTube has got a bigger reach than if I was just on, let's say, Rumble. And also Rumble's probably going to get banned by the British government soon, by the looks of it. So the only way British people will be able to go on Rumble is if they use a VPN. That may well get banned by the British government shortly. So even going on Rumble won't do you any good. But you won't get a tenth of the number of people watching you there as you would here. And my view is I detest the censorship and the self-censorship that you have to do on YouTube. But if you don't do that, YouTube will just ban you because they're not in the least bit fair. They're not in the least bit moderate. They're just, everyone who's to the right of Mao Zedong is bad as far as they're concerned, you know?
I mean, well, you think back to when we were covering Prevent, the Prevent inquiry, which I forget the name of the inquiry, but you know, they were like disproportionately, they were like ignoring all of these like radicalized Islamic youths and going after like kids that are like criticized like Troon stuff in schools and things like that. It was pretty obscene, you know. And you can actually you can see people on. Yeah, go on.
Sorry, you carry on, man.
I was just going to say you can actually like see people on like Twitter that you know, like young people going on Twitter and like telling their story about like when they had to go for a Prevent workshop and stuff like that for just the most inane bullshit.
I would just say, look, you know, Tomb of Arminius says anti-whiteism is rampant in the normies as well. They are the foot soldiers for the regime and don't even know it. I don't think that's entirely true, Tomb of Arminius. I think the where it's rampant is with the lefty woke types who make a lot of noise on social media. I think a lot of the average normies are not like that at all, to be honest. But they are sensible enough to know to keep their mouth shut. You know.
I think the problem is, Judy, I think you're a bit too trusting in the average Brit these days. I think you got too much hope. Because I mean, I'm going off my generation here. A lot of them are just completely empty vessels. They will just parrot anything they told, like Agent Smith from The Matrix in that way. Like I know people who I grew up with. I used to say like very racial jokes about them. Fast forward to now, I just see them regularly posting, just be self-loathing. Oh, I hate Britain because of slavery. Or I hate Britain because of blah blah blah, all the usual crap.
Well, even though Britain was the first and most important country to get rid of slavery, it's so insane.
Yeah, come on, Duke. I mean,
it's just so insane. Britain was the only country that expended blood.
That was a mistake.
To stop the bloody thing.
Yeah, no one fancies
Adam,
for
I am
so
not.
What's the point of?
I am not going to comment on that, but I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. Was it worth it? Probably not, actually. You know, a lot of good British sailors and Marines got killed over that crap.
So why do people brag about it then? I mean, I don't see it as worth it, to be honest, because we'd never get any thanks for it. We're never getting any gratitude.
No,
back for it,
I'm agreeing
so
with you,
I don't care.
Mitch. I'm agreeing with you and Alman. That's increasingly my view. That's increasingly my view. It really is. But it is a fact. If you were going to look at who really ended slavery, well, it was mostly the Brits, to be honest. You know, it really was mostly the Brits.
But
Tricky Woo, I will put a link to my Twitter in the description after the stream.
I mean, yeah, there's definitely an like you're right about that, Mitch. I mean, there's this like even to talk of like the anti-whiteism comment, like even when you talk to like a British person and they're telling you about their position on immigration, it will still sometimes be paired in this sort of context that it's like bad for the immigrants, that like immigration is somehow harmful to the immigrants because they're getting used as cheap labor. It's like I don't give a fuck about that. Like, why why should it's kind of being paired in a sort of anti-white way. You know, why should a white British person, or tangentially a native British person, be concerned about that next to the actual fate of their nation? You know, it's kind of obscene how people sort of formalize that in their mind like that. They have this sort of like.
On the other hand, I mean, if we ever get to the stage of remigration, which in my opinion is essential, I'll use that as. I'll absolutely lash onto that as a good reason to send them back so they can help their own people back in their own.
But the problem is, it's kind of self-defeating, isn't it? It's like if you think about there's that Bowden bit about the red squirrel, right? If you think, you have to, if you start paring it down as well, I care about this because I'm worried it's going to affect these people by X amount rather than yourself and your people, you're kind of you're hamstringing yourselves in terms of what you can offer as a movement in terms of patronage and support, but also you're not,
of course,
you're not really offering anything. You're not really offering anything vitalistic. I was literally just talking about this before I came on, like to someone else. The whole reason why our society's gone down the shitter so damn fast, and America wasn't able to hold on to its top position for very long at all, was because this sort of new founding myth that they've latched onto, which is this what some people call the boomer truth regime, this sort of post World War II consensus. Is it's negative, it's cancerous, it's literally, there's nothing vitalistic about it. It's purely a negative vision for the world. No energy is going to come out of that.
They want to, Adam, they want to ruin a nice green space close to the Palace of Westminster, the Houses of Parliament, with a Holocaust museum, when Britain in World War II fought against that shit.
Yeah.
Why do we need a Holocaust museum? We don't. We do not. Britain didn't do it. No one in Britain did it. We fought against those people. I'm sorry. Why do we need a Holocaust museum? No reason. No reason whatsoever, in my opinion. We don't need one.
Yeah.
But apparently, according to the globalists, we must have one. Why? And I think this is, when you're talking about boomer truth regime and all the rest of it, this is the real truth, is that, the original sin, supposedly of all white people and all Europeans, is what Hitler did, supposedly, in World War II. This is the original sin. Britain didn't do it. So why do we need a Holocaust museum? We don't. Why should we ruin a nice green space that has been there for hundreds and hundreds of years for some ugly, awful museum that we don't need at all? Put it up in Israel, for God's sake,
I will say, because Richard Ford said about the trains in India, there's that bit in Mary Poppins where he's like, railways for Africa. But I actually had an actual argument with a leftist about this once, and I said, well, the empire was kind of like too busy in its latter years paying out, and a lot of those places were a net cost. And I brought up about the setting up of railways. This was a guy I was arguing with in real life, and he was saying, he turned around, and he went, no, we built the railways so we could extract wealth from those countries. And I was like, you know what? If he wants to believe that, I'm fine with that. That's actually probably like an actual base reason to actually build railways in India.
There's a good film called what's it called? I'm trying to remember what it's called now. It's about the British building the East African Railway before the First World War. And it's about the Lions of Savo. What's it called? The Ghost in the Darkness, I think it's called. It's a pretty good film.
Yeah.
It's a pity that the American dude who plays the main British officer in it tries to do a bad Irish accent. But anyway, they often do that.
What did you say?
But yeah, this was kind of a true story. And these two man-eating lions were eating loads of people, including Africans and the Indian workers who the Brits were using to build this railway. And why the film is good is the opening scenes is this British Empire builder dude saying to this lieutenant colonel from the Royal Engineers, who's going to be sent out there to build a bridge across rivers and stuff for the railway, that Britain wants to build a railway from the Cape to Cairo, etc. And we want to do it before the French do and before the Germans do. And yeah, I'm cool with that. That was all right. I thought that was good stuff, Yeah, it was Michael Douglas and Val Kilmer, Michael 19th century fan. And it's not a bad movie, actually. It's not bad at all. And it was all filmed in South Africa, by the way. But anyway, yeah, it's quite a good film. It's called Ghost in the Darkness, I believe. And it's based loosely on a true story.
I see it.
Yeah, it's not a bad film, actually. I quite enjoy it. But it's and when the Empire dude turns around and says to this Lieutenant Colonel in the Royal Engineers, we're sending out you out here basically to beat the French and the Germans. I'm cool with that. That's cool. I got no problem with that. That's what the British Empire used to do when it was good.
It's like on one hand, I always quite liked Cecil Rhodes, like the idea of being this guy that's just like, literally like almost in a Shakespearean sense, he's like sad that he can't go up there and colonize the stars, right? But at the same time, he would also then, especially later in his life, say some pretty cringe shit, like how it was unfair that black people in Africa couldn't like aspire to high office and stuff, why should he care?
Utter bullshit. They would. Well, I mean, I lived in Africa for a long time, and they just weren't ready for it. And if you don't believe me, look at the state of every black African country that you get a name, with no exceptions. Just look at any of them. South Africa, Rhodesia, or Zimbabwe, as it has been for longer. Just go check them out and compare what they were like when they were white-run countries to what they're like now. And all of them are far, far, far worse. They just are.
Yeah. And it's like to the extent of which when the...
for 15 years, and I've been to about a dozen African countries. So I know what I'm speaking about. I'm not talking out my rear end,
Yeah, sorry, it's like to the extent of which... to the extent at which the Boomercon types want to believe that those societies were better for their African populations, it was only because they prioritized their white populations, and it just happens that occasionally a rising tide lifts most of the ships, but that should never be the intention of those societies, and that's where these people often go so badly wrong.
Yeah, I mean, South Africa was better for black people under a white government, and Rhodesia was better than Zimbabwe under a white government for black
because
people.
They were built for whites by whites.
Yeah, but it lifted up the educational standards, the medical care standards, and also the economic standards of all the black people too. It just
Yeah,
did.
but it wasn't the focus though, and we shouldn't care about that.
Yeah, no, it wasn't aimed at doing that, but it did it as a byproduct.
Mm.
It did it as a byproduct. I mean, Kenya, for example. I mean, so I see someone talking about Malawi in the chat, which I've been to, by the way. Sorry, Ghana. I wouldn't say Ghana's doing all right. The Sen of Sen's fortress, by the way. And that comes to me from people I knew who were black many years ago. But anyway, if you look at Kenya, for example, Kenya is easily the best of doing probably the best overall of the black African countries, because it was the least anti-white of them when it got independence. But even that's got huge problems with like the Muslim takeover of sub-Saharan Africa, etc.
Yeah, you can't travel around Kenya without a guard.
Yeah, exactly. But that wasn't the case originally.
Mm.
And of course, it was the first place where they started trying to fight against the whites with the Mau Mau rebellion. And, you know, people will tell you, oh, the British Army were really cruel to the Mau Mau people and, you know, all the rest of it. They won't tell you what they did to white women and children who they managed to capture in Kenya in the 90s.
Yeah, we were quite cool to those people, but ultimately that's all they could understand. So,
and it was in response to them butchering, raping, and killing white women and kids. So, you know. As far as I'm concerned, that's allowed. Sorry. I believe that white people should have exactly the same rights as every other racial group in the world, whether it be Jewish people in Israel or.
I think they should have more.
Well, but yeah, no. I'm going to be fair here, Adam, and we are on YouTube. I would say white people should have exactly the same rights as, say, Jewish people in Israel, for example. You know, if the enemy attacks you, you should be able to defend yourself.
I think that white privilege doesn't exist, but it should do.
Well, again, I won't argue with that, Adam. I'm not going to argue with that whatsoever. But I mean, apparently Jewish privilege is all right in Israel. Seems to be, anyway. But you know, what I'm, you know, I've said many times, I am entirely neutral between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I don't think either of them are our friends, because they're not. And if they want to kill each other off, that's not our business, and we should let them do it. But you know, if Israel can have an ethno-state, which it basically does have, why can't Britain have an Anglo-Celtic ethno-state, or France have a French ethno-state? I don't see this. I don't understand what the difference is, to be honest. I don't understand what the difference is. Apparently, if Israel does it, it's all right. Israel can go around like flattening whole blocks because there might be a couple of terrorists somewhere in a tunnel underneath. And it doesn't matter how many women and kids they kill to flatten those blocks. It's okay. You know, if we did that, you'd have every left winger and every black dude and every brown dude and everyone would just be saying, "Oh no, the terrible British," you know. But
unless you actually have the
no
power and thus control the media means, and then you can kind of, I mean, you see this in like I mean, we've talked about this before too, but you know, like Japan will literally post videos of them like dragging some African, kicking and screaming for an airport and throw him onto a plane to support him. No one gives a damn. You know, it's just the way it is. It's just the way it's just the way the power works out there. The establishment pushes that sort of thing. That's fine. You know, if you had like, you could even get, like, as cringe as that guy is most of the time, you could get like Douglas Murray to produce A Strange Death of Europe series to go on the BBC. If you could get to the point where you control the means of the communication to that extent, you could do basically anything you wanted. This whole idea of like soft power, that you'll jeopardize your soft power by like being mean to the Browns, is just obviously absurd.
It's insane. It's insane.
And
It
almost
is.
to every last one, every single one of these sort of soft power enjoyers who bleat on about this stuff have a complete room temperature IQ. You know, it's they're not people who should be taken seriously in any proper society.
No.
But I mean, we've travelled a lot from the original subject, but that's basically it.
I bring it back because now, so you can end it the way you want to end it on. But I just think, you know, if we spoke at all realistically about these things that we're talking about at the moment, YouTube would just delete the channel. They just would, because you're not allowed to say it. You're not allowed to say it. The only way you can say it is like by being very, very careful and going off on an angle. And as people have said many times, if you want to know, you know, who your real enemy is, look who you're not allowed to criticize, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really have an end to my subject, though.
And I'm nowhere near as extreme on that thing as many people in our sphere are. Sorry, Adamant. Yeah. So how did you want to finish off your?
I mean, we've kind of covered everything. We talked about the Church of England angle. We talked about the Action Foundation, and of course, it's many other NGOs as well. I covered briefly, like just for a little bit of context, the numbers. I think we covered the majority of the timeline. The manhunt's still on. I'm pretty sure I checked a little while ago, and there hasn't been any changes since 1:54 this afternoon. Is my thing out of date?
That's like 7 hours, I guess. 7, probably 8, nearly 8 hours now. You wouldn't think it would be that easy for this dude to hide out, to be honest. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. They like, this guy had access to like 5 properties. I don't quite know how that's possible.
Who were being paid for by British taxpayers, right?
Yeah. I assume they're not all his. I assume that these were properties of like other Afghan asylum seekers that he knew of or was friends with or some such.
Yeah, just crazy. And just to let people in the chat know, yes, I did put Richard Ford in a timeout. I didn't ban him. He'll be back in a bit.
Oh.
But anyway, Mitch, anything you wanted to say on that subject, mate?
Not really. What's said has been said. So
yeah, I think Adam covered it pretty well. Did you have a first subject you wanted to bring up, Mitch?
What was it? I was going to talk to someone else, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, we haven't talked about the Ukraine in a bit. Like all I've heard about, I don't know, Ukraine is there's a big push for extraditing all the Ukrainian men back to Ukraine to serve in the army.
Yep, there are. Well, they're running out of troops, mate. That's all that is.
Well, it's like they're saying they were native infantry, which I remember posting something like, I don't know, like a year and a half ago saying that while the Ukrainians don't have as many armed vehicles as Russia does, they have a shed load of infantry to work with, but never were native infantry, which begs an issue. What is Ukraine really fighting with at this point? Because they're never going to have as many armored vehicles as the Russians.
They're never going to have as many infantry as the Russians. They're never going to have as much artillery. They're never going to have as much artillery ammunition. They're never going to have as much air power or missiles. So, you know, they're basically on hiding to nothing. But I mean, you know, whatever.
Yeah. So I mean, I can't remember what my original topic was going to be for a second.
The Russians are making quite good progress in Ukraine at the moment, as far as I can see.
Well, it's still like meters per day, so it's not exactly blitzkrieg, though, is it?
Richard Ford is back. See, I didn't ban him. I just timed him out. Michael Kay, 19th century, found the chief of the staff of the UK Army was not fired. That he was the head of UK Army and he was due to retire, and he made those statements about conscription when he was about to retire, which is something traditionally the heads of the British services always do. He wasn't fired. He was retiring anyway.
Wait, what's the tradition that they have to come out and be like, "Oh yeah, we're fucked. We ain't got enough men, and the government shrunk the forces too much."
When they yeah, but basically what it is, you're not wrong, Alman. Actually, what it is that when the head of the British Army, the Royal Navy, or the Royal Air Force retire, they are allowed one statement which comes somewhere close to the truth because they're retiring.
Right.
And that was. And what the chief of staff of the UK Army was really saying was that the UK Army is so small now, it's entirely useless for any real warfighting purposes, which it is. It's 72,000 men. If the people I follow who like monitor the British Army very closely, if they're right, it's going to go down to as low as 67,000 men, right? Which is like, that would last in Ukraine, I don't know, in a war like Ukraine, it would last 3 weeks, maybe, you know,
Yeah.
if they had enough ammunition and the Brits don't, but, you know, it's like just craziness.
Yeah, like his statement was fairly milquetoast, as with most things. The reaction was the interesting. Yeah,
I was very happy to see everyone on the right saying that, not going to serve. Including me, by the way, which I would never have said even 10 years ago, but now absolutely can't possibly suggest that any good.
You don't think a strong revolutionary force would be born out of veterans of a conscription war?
I wish.
Yeah,
I don't think we'd have enough survivors for one thing, Alan. You know, if you look at armies that have done that in the past, let's say mid-century Germans, for example, in World War One, their army was millions and millions strong. Now they were thoroughly defeated at the end of the war, and mostly, it has to be said, by the Brits, the Canadians, and the Australians. Because not all that many American troops ever saw action in Europe. Only a few of them did. They were mostly defeated, and the French army, after the 1917 mutinies, following the enormous losses at Verdun, the French army never recovered from that. In fact, they hadn't even recovered from it in 1940, let alone in 1918. So the people who beat the German army in the 100 Days campaign in 1918 were overwhelmingly British, Canadian, and Australian, and New Zealand, it has to be said. And there was even a South African brigade, a white South African brigade. Those were the guys who overwhelmingly defeated the German army in 1918. And unlike the stab in the back theory and all the rest of it, which people came out with in Germany in the 20s and 30s, that wasn't true. The German army was militarily defeated. It wasn't worth it from the British point of view, not at all. But yeah, we did beat them in 1918, and we beat them bloody thoroughly. And Germany went for an armistice before we invaded them. That's a fact. But the original sin of Britain, as I've said many times on this stream, was joining World War I in 1914, which Britain had no reason to do, really. And then in raising a mass land army against all British military tradition. It was an enormous error.
Well, that's the thing, Robbo, isn't it? I mean, when you think about it, I mean, you take a war in Ukraine, it's kind of teaching you a lesson that you can have like a small professional army, but not having more men means more of an advantage rather than just having like a small force of simply with big tech on your side. For example, 200,000 men.
But Mitch, let me make something very clear. Like, you know, they talk about the contemptible British Army in 1914. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, they talk about the contemptible little British Army in 1914. That contemptible little British Army in 1914 was 6 infantry divisions and a very big cavalry division. And we were
Okay,
able to
100,000
add
men,
another
I believe it
2,
was.
and we were able to add another 2 infantry divisions to that from troops who eventually got home from the Empire. Okay, so you're talking about a contemptible little British Army, which was actually 8 infantry divisions and almost 2 cavalry divisions.
So you're talking what? Like,
Compare that with
let's
the
say
modern British Army
100,000 men.
today. Yeah, it was like 160,000 once they called up the reservists, 180,000,
Okay, and
something like that.
And let's say,
And today we got
you
a
take the
British Army
Russians when
which
they
is
started the invasion of Ukraine.
72,000 men, and most of those are in support services, and far too many of them are women.
Okay, and let's say, right, but you had like 160,000 men in a British Army of today. Now, sure, yeah, that could be. I mean, the thing is, right, Bo, the British Army, even like at like strength, like, but I mean, even like let's say the BEF, which had like what 100,000 originally, they would not be able to fight that
Yeah, but
long by
we
themselves
left
against the
two,
entire might of the German army.
Mitch, but
That's the main.
the British Expeditionary Force in 1914 left 2 divisions back in UK on purpose, right? So the 100,000 we sent, it actually was more like 120,000 that we sent to France. Yeah, there were still 2 divisions, regular divisions, fully trained soldiers back in the UK. So
Okay,
you've got to
and you
understand,
take
you're
the full
talking
might.
today 72,000 British soldiers. That's the whole army. That is every person in the army. That's like the morons who sit on computers and go against right wing stuff by doing propaganda in whatever brigade it's called and all the rest of it. It's the British Army today is vastly smaller than the British Army in 1914 was.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm saying, sure, yeah, you can have like a really professional army, but you also have to think quantity is a quality of its own, which is one thing. Like you take, I
But
don't know,
Britain
let's say
doesn't
Swedish
want to
army.
fight. But
Okay,
Britain doesn't want to fight a continental style war like in Ukraine. We never want to fight that sort of war. The British Army should be a projectile which is
yeah,
fired by
and that lends
the
itself
Navy.
to. Okay, and that lends itself easily to people like Americans claiming, "Oh, well, the Brits didn't really. They were just too afraid of combat. They just have all the big fights into all the big powers." Like you take, for example, the 7 Years' War, where, oh, sure, yeah, we'll send like forces of regulars to take over the French colonies, while all the continental fighting was done by Prussia. We just paid them. We didn't
Which
really. We had
wasn't
a
true.
screening
Which
force.
wasn't true. We did send British armies to aid the Prussians in Europe.
Yeah, and they just stayed close to Hanover, but didn't really actually help. Like you take battles like Kunersdorf, or like you take the battles like Friedrich the Great fought. There's only 1 or 2 where the British Army actually helped. The rest of them
Yes,
we
there
just
are
stayed
1 or
back in
2 where the
Hanover.
British Army actually helped. Yeah, they were. And then you
Yeah,
can go up
and
to the
they stayed behind in
Napoleonic
Hanover.
Wars. Then you can go up to the Napoleonic Wars, and the first Allied country to invade France in 1814 wasn't Germany or Russia or Austria. It was Britain from the peninsula, from Spain.
Okay, and one will easily levy the charge that, oh well, before then we just didn't really fight the French as hard as, let's say, the Russians, who lost hundreds of thousands at
But
areas
that's
like the
because their
Rodino.
troops weren't all that great, mate. But the British Army fought a huge amount of French in the
Well, that's the thing
peninsula.
about the Russians, though, isn't it? Like they fight continental wars, whereas we have a different tradition of, I don't know, just having like a very marine-like force in the sense that we just have a Royal Navy, just ferry our troops all around the world and hit the enemy where they're weakest. But also that lends itself to the charge at times where people say, oh, well, we don't fight hard enough, unlike the continental powers like Prussia, Austria, and Russia, who suffered far more casualties than we did, because, of course, they don't have the luxury of having the English Channel and the wooden wall, i.e. our Royal Navy. So it's one of
But
those things where...
who provided, Mitch, who provided the Prussian, Austrian, and Russian military with literally tens of thousands of their muskets, their bayonets, their swords, even their uniforms, to say nothing of supplies and vast amounts of gold. Who supplied that to the Austrians and the Prussians and the Russians? It was the British. And unlike, say, Lend-Lease in World War II, we didn't ask for it back after the war. It was a gift.
It's not
Like,
really a
if
gift,
you see
but
the- if you
it's a
see
transactional
Brutus-
arrangement where we said to them, look, use these weapons to fight the French. And yeah, it's similar to what NATO's doing in Ukraine right now. We're just feeding weapons to Ukraine to tell them, okay, fight on our behalf against the Russians, because we don't want to get our hands dirty in terms of fighting against the Russians. We're just sending you to be our cannon fodder instead.
But that's not true. The vast majority of the British army was in the peninsula under the Duke of Wellington, beating the French every time they fought them.
Okay, and, how big was the army under the Duke of Wellington?
Why did
the armies of Russia, Prussia, and Austria?
Hang on.
I'm not disagreeing with you, Joe. I'm just saying the thing is, our style of warfare having like these small professional armies just punching weaker areas, it does lend itself easily to the charge of, oh well, British are cowardly.
It's not.
Blah, blah, blah.
No, it's not fair, mate. It's not fair, because Wellington's British army, by the time he invaded France in 1814, and I'll say again, it was the British who were the first Allied army to invade Napoleonic France. Wasn't the Russians, wasn't the Prussians, wasn't the Austrians. It was the British. And when Wellington's British army invaded France, he had about 50,000 British and King's German Legion soldiers. And the King's German Legion soldiers were an integral part of the British army at that time, right? So he had 50,000 soldiers there. And he didn't even take the Spanish into France because he knew what the Spanish soldiers would do to the French peasants. So he didn't take them. He left them in Spain. He took the Portuguese.
Why didn't he let the Spanish tag along with him? Because he wouldn't.
Because he knew that they would rape, kill, and torture their way through France, like the French had to them.
Yeah,
the French raped, killed, and tortured their way through Spain, mate, and Portugal. But by the time Wellington invaded Spain in 1814, it was quite a few years later, and the Portuguese were much better disciplined. But he knew if he took the Spanish soldiers into France, they would do the same to the French. So he didn't. He left them in Spain.
Okay, and we could have done with more troops to supplement our forces. Because, I mean, 50,000 isn't going to cover as much ground as, let's say, having 150,000, is it?
But to be fair, Wellington then proceeded, as he always did, to win every single battle he fought in France. If he hadn't won, I'd agree with you, but he won every single battle he fought, even though he was fighting.
Okay, and at that time, the Prussians, Austrians, and Russians, after having won at Leipzig. Well, the thing was, by that time, I mean, yeah, that 50,000 army, how good would they do against a full might of France? Like, if France wasn't having to fight against Prussia, Austria, and Russia. That's the thing. You take, for example...
Mitch, Leipzig would have been absolutely impossible without British weapons, muskets, bayonets, swords, cannon, supplies, and even British-made uniforms for the various countries who fought at Leipzig. It would have been impossible. There would have been no Leipzig.
Okay,
but this was not given to those countries as Lend-Lease that the British then said, oh, no, you owe us loads of money after the war. We didn't do that. We just said, no, it was a gift, keep it.
Okay, this is one where, you get, because you do get, like, you get, say, like, let's say the likes of Germans or Russians or Austrians or whoever, they will say words to the effect of, oh, well, the British, right, they are essentially cowardly. They rather just, like, pay other powers to do most of the fighting, while the British will just send like a much smaller force, like 50,000 men, to attack the French when they happen to be at their weakest. That's no, Mitch, this is not true. No, this is not true. Britain was fighting France in Spain and Portugal when no one else was. You know, the Peninsular War started in 1808.
the Prussians and the French, the Prussians and the Russians and the Austrians weren't even fighting Napoleon there.
Yeah,
It
but
was
that was
only the
significantly
British
earlier
that were
than.
fighting Napoleon. Sorry, I beg your pardon. What were you saying?
I was just saying that was significantly earlier than what Mitch was talking about, though.
Yeah, it was. But Britain went to Portugal in 1808, fought in Spain in 1809 and 1810, and Wellington, it was Wellington, said, look, I can defend Portugal against the French no matter what. And so even when the majority of the French army was sent into the Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain and Portugal, for anyone who doesn't know, Britain was able to defend Portugal, which is all they needed to do, because Portugal, if you could defend it, was always a base that you could then take Spain from. Raw Biscuits, if you come out with shit like this again, mate, I will ban you from my channel, because I definitely do not think that. I'm merely trying to point out that Britain's contribution, and also don't forget, it was the Royal Navy overwhelmingly which destroyed the French Navy. So the French Navy wasn't able to do anything very useful in the Napoleonic Wars.
Well, French Navy was, as a
they
record, have been absolutely terrible compared to the Royal Navy. So it's not really.
Well, yes, it was, because the French killed all their decent officers off in the Revolution. But yeah,
I'm not talking about. I'm just talking historical trends. France has always had a much worse navy compared to ours. Like, it's always been like that way. I mean,
but
7 years
Mitch,
war.
you also need to understand. I don't know why you don't understand this. I mean, one of the things we sit here talking about all the time today in 2024, Royal Biscuits, is that Britain should be doing stuff for British interests, right? Well, back in the Napoleonic Wars, Britain did do stuff for British interests. Okay? We did. And I'm good with that. You know what? I'm happy to help the Prussians when they're doing something that suits the Brits or the Russians or the Austrians. But if they're not, then they can get fucked. I'm sorry. I'm an Anglo-Celtic nationalist. I'm not a European nationalist. Never have been.
I don't know. So, I mean, you got Richard in chat, who's like.
I'm just ignoring Richard because he's just being a troll.
Well, I mean, I think, was it him or Jonathan Bowden who once said like something along the lines of the British aren't really brave, except when the government allows them to be so at times. So I don't know what you'd say about that.
Mate. I wouldn't agree with whoever said that, whether it was Richard or Jonathan Bowden. I wouldn't agree with that, but there we go.
Well, let's just look at the British people of today. Like, I mean, sure, yeah, they're happy. I mean, you take the Wolves versus West Brom match last week, where you had Wolves fans shouting, let him die, when a West Brom fan got bottled in the head or something like that. It was a Black Country derby.
Uh-huh.
Now, none of those Englishmen, however, will be willing to put up stickers at Sam Miller did. I bet I'd be willing to.
Well, that's sad, isn't it? That's sad, is all I can say.
Yeah, but that kind of indicates what Bowden said. Well, like, the British are people who we're only brave when the government allows us to be so.
I like Jonathan Bowden. Doesn't mean I always agree with him, man.
I think he's right. I mean, I kind of think that's largely true of a lot of other people too.
Well, I think that's true of every.
Well, the Germans are like those. I mean, the Germans and the Swedes like those well aware. So the Germans are very bureaucratic people, and they'll turn on each other if the government tells them turning on each other is a virtue. So that's why Germany is.
I would just say to Aubrey in the chat that the number who died in World War I that she's put up there is entirely accurate, but it is it's Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and back then South Africa as well. That's the number of the old white Commonwealth who died in World War II. They weren't all British, although the majority of them certainly were. So
yeah. But like, you got to admit though, like, I mean, the Swedish also the same where, oh sure, yeah, like, you know, Sweden will look back at like, the Swedish Empire period with a sense of, oh, it was great. But you know, like, so the Swedish, because they're very feminist these days, or generally, not all of them, but you get the point. You know, like, you look up the monarchs they celebrate. They always celebrate like these queens they have, because the current zeitgeist tells them to do so. So that's another thing. Like Britain, Sweden, Germany, we've all got the same problem of generally we're only brave when the establishment allows us to be. So other than that, we don't want going against the trend.
Who is brave when the establishment doesn't allow us to be so? Mitch? Which country is? Japanese? Don't think so. Russians? Don't think so.
I mean, but that's the thing. What about it's like Jonathan Bowden? He is right when he says, "Look, the British are people who they will not be brave against an establishment if the establishment tells them it's not okay to be brave in that particular circumstance." Like you say, you know, it's easy for like the establishment to go to the British and say World War II and go, "Okay, well, the Germans are enemies now, lads. Let's staff the bombers and invade Normandy." Or whatever. But
Mitch,
the English of today,
I'm not understanding what you're getting at.
Changed.
I'm not understanding what you're getting at. Explain to me which nation on earth is brave when the establishment doesn't want you to be. If you can tell me one that is, I'll go, okay, fair enough. Which one is? Because as far as I'm concerned, all nations are like that. Of course, if your nation turns around and tells you, yeah, it's good to do this, every nation is going to be the same, you know? I reckon a lot of Zulu
okay, but there's a particular institutional
because their king told them to go and do it, you know?
Well, I mean, you take Russia, right? For example, even in the midst of like Stalin getting rid of the Orthodox Church and all this before World War II, that was, he still had like these Orthodox women, like all the way in the countryside, who would just they'd still have these little shrines to pray to God. So they'll still do that. Whereas the average Englishman of today, I don't think he'd even be willing to talk about. I mean, the sort of racial jokes I used to say, like, I don't know, 7 years ago, for example, I wouldn't be able to get away with them now with the friends nowadays as I could back then. So
I don't know who you know, mate. So I don't know.
These are normies. These are normies, by the way. These are people who called it black squares back when Fresh Prince of Nowhere died off.
The people I know are almost like as friends, like real life friends. They're almost all ex-military guys. But they come from several countries like Australia, Britain, Canada, South Africa. But they all have pretty much the same views. And all of us would have been, even 10 years ago, we would have all been absolutely normie conservatives. And none of us are now. None of us. Not one.
But that's
none of us are normie conservatives anymore.
Right, so when I say like, oh, well, friends I knew growing up who didn't mind my edgy humour 7 years ago, for example, I mean, these are normie types. You know, these are guys who go to football matches. These are guys who work, let's say, they work in engineering or in terms of female ones. I mean, they weren't really friends, but you get a point, like people I knew when I was back when I was in secondary school, just normie women, and they didn't mind my edgy humor 7 years ago, for example. Nowadays, if I were to engage in that edgy humor in front of them once more nowadays, I suspect I would be down the police station within 5 minutes.
Yeah, women are a different story, I would say, though. I mean, you know, women are women.
No, I'm not talking just about women. I'm talking about friends. I'm talking about my generation in general, where I know guys who work.
That's a bit sad.
Well, I know guys who, when Fresh Prince of Nowhere died off, like nearly 4 years ago, they were all posting black squares about it. And
I don't even know who that person
is,
mate, but okay.
Well, his first name started with a G and his second name started with an F. Put it that way. You know.
Yeah, look, mate. The only thing I could say to you in those circumstances is choose your friends more carefully. But
well, these are people who work with, so that's kind of
Richard
the tragic
Ford
side of it.
Richard Ford is telling me I don't want to hear about this bullshit British Bulldog spirit anymore. Thanks. Well, fuck off, Richard. You don't have to listen to this channel. Piss off, mate. Go.
I'll be honest, I don't really want to hear about it either, though.
But I'm not talking about that in the sense of the so-called Spitfire patriotism. I'm not talking about that, Adam, at all. You know, my view is, and this is the problem that you get, I was just having a discussion with Mitch about the Napoleonic Wars, and if I had my way, I wouldn't really go on about World War II all that much, because World War II, however brave the individual officers and ordinary officers and soldiers who fought in it were, was not to the benefit of Britain at all. In fact, quite the reverse. So what I think is we should look at stuff that was British that goes back beyond that. And obviously, because of the way I think about World War One, which I think was the original sin of Britain, joining it in 1914 and then raising a mass army, I don't want to talk about that either. So yeah, you do kind of have to go back in history, don't you? If you're going to talk about people who are actually fighting for recognizably good British stuff.
I think where we're just coming from in regards to you is the fact that at times you can be very like Anglo-exceptionalist in the sense that, you know, you think that the British will all... Like,
well, I am Anglo-exceptionist. I don't pretend I'm not, mate. And I'm always going to be Anglo-exceptionist. But that will also go back to Alfred the Great and his Anglo-Saxons beating the Danes, which almost nobody else did.
Okay, so like when Bowden says, okay, well, the British will only be brave if establishment says it's okay to be so, what part of that makes you disagree outright?
Because I think everyone's the same. I think all nations are like that.
Oh no, I mean you had Russians who rejected the Soviet Union. I mean, fair. Like there are plenty of Russians, let's say that's in World War II or in the time of the Soviet Union, they'd still have like these Orthodox shrines in their houses. In spite
and you have people like Sam Melia in Britain today.
Okay, and you know you have 9 whites in the jury who were happy to declare them guilty alongside 3 non-whites.
Disgusting scum, as far as I'm concerned, mate. Disgusting scum. Yeah. I would have been, if I'd have been on that jury, I wouldn't have even taken any notice of the evidence. I would have just said, no, he's not guilty. And I would have sat there for however many weeks it took for me to be cut off that jury.
But that's the thing, Robbo, is that most of the people of our ethnic group, they'll probably agree, not full on lockstep with it, but you can just well imagine that. Even like when they might agree, oh, well, we have to cut immigration, they're still going to consider one Sam Melia beyond the pale so much that they ought to.
Well, I don't. You see, man, I don't. Like I said, if I'd have been on that jury, no one would have.
Okay, but you will be exceptions of the norm.
I would have just said no.
That's the issue at hand. But that's a problem. What would you?
Yeah, I would have just said no. He's not guilty. No, he's not guilty. No, he's not guilty.
But everyone else would have. This is the point. You know, like I can go into any office where even one where a majority of the people in there actively complain against or are anti-immigration, they will still say, oh, you know, those stickers are vile. Oh, that's really terrible what he did, putting those stickers on that post.
White is a vile sticker.
Yes. No, because that's not the ones they were looking at. They were looking at. Yeah, they would have been looking at. They would have been looking at the other ones he had, and they would have been told ad nauseum by some prosecution about what the real motivations were behind this, and they would have just taken a hook, line, and sinker. It's just the way people are.
But I would have argued against.
You've ultimately got to accept that. You've ultimately got to accept that, you know, the plebs are plebs, and you need to work
absolutely. But if you know, on a jury, at worst, I would hope any jury I was on like that would end up with a hung jury and then left on of trial. Because I would never, ever have accepted his guilty. I just would have said no chance. Just on principle, I would have said no.
Okay, that's the issue at hand, though, isn't it, Duke? With the exceptions to the norm, like most people do not think.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, you know, there's the 3 of us. There's the people in the chat. There's the people on our Discord. There's people in our wider sphere. We're not alone in this. I sometimes think we get a bit too black-pilled. You know, there are other people who do think the same way that we do. And that, you know, if you're an Anglo-Celtic person, an Anglo-Celtic man particularly, you should stand alongside other Anglo-Celtic men. Because, you know, that's how, like you and I, Mitch, and Adam, and I'm sure, are descendants of people who beat the Danes under Alfred the Great.
Okay, but the Anglo-Saxons fight under Alfred but weren't subjected to a state that propagandized their own people to hate themselves.
I know that, mate. I know that. And
what's
one of the points of this channel is to try in its tiny, tiny way to undo that. Which is why I get pissed off with say, oh, I talk about muskets. I'm sorry, I ain't going to talk about World War II and World War One, boys, because to use Jonathan Bowden's phrase, we should step over that shit. Which I have said many times. We should go back to when Britain used to act in Britain's interest, which is what I think we should do today. You know, we shouldn't have an Indian banker as our Prime Minister, nor should we have a scumbag socialist like Sir Keir Starmer, who made sure that very, very few of these so-called grooming gangs people were ever prosecuted because he was head of the Crown Prosecution Service. Anyone who thinks he's going to be better is a moron, in my opinion. I hate and detest the so-called, in air quotes, conservatives. But Labour will be at least as bad. The Lib Dems will be just as bad, and so for jolly well certainty will the Greens. If you're on the right, the real right, in Britain today, you've got to vote for one of the smaller.
Can't we just not vote? Like,
no, because I don't think that'll work, Adam, because it will just go like Portugal, where almost nobody votes.
Duke, we're much worse than Portugal. Come on. Duke, come on, we're much worse than Portugal.
Look, you guys can have your own views, and you can state them in a minute if you want. My view is if you're on the right of centre in Britain at the moment, at the next general election, you have to vote for one of the smaller right of centre populist parties. And I don't even care which one, to be honest. It makes no difference. I don't
have any.
Just the one that's the most likely to win in your area. But don't vote Labour, as some people on the right are trying to tell you, which is ridiculous. And not voting will just lead you to what happens in Portugal. Portugal constantly gets just over 40% of people voting. And the left-wing party there, which took over after Salazar, was it? That party just carries on and carries on and carries on because they don't care.
Okay,
they'll fiddle election
anyway, regardless of its Tory or Labour.
Globalist Indian banker Sunak.
What's the difference, though?
Was rejected twice.
What's the difference?
By Conservative Party voters, and was then parachuted into place with nobody voting for him, right?
So what's the difference?
And Biden in America, the most popular president in American history.
What's the difference?
Definitely didn't do anything to fiddle the election.
So if you voted in, if you got a vote on the person that came in instead of Sunak, what would be the actual difference? What would be different to now?
Well, if an Indian banker wasn't Prime Minister of Britain, I'd be quite happy, to be honest.
But nothing else changes?
Probably not much, mate, to be honest. But you know what? I would give quite a lot for Britain to be run by an Anglo-Celtic person, other than to care I'm a cuck Starmer.
No one out of the big three will run in my area. That is true for a lot of places as well.
I'm saying, I'm
not even going to bother walking down to the voting booth.
Fine, so don't vote, mate. And you know what? Don't vote. Fine. Don't. If there's no point in your area, don't do it. I'm telling people what they should do in most areas. Most people won't take any notice. Most people will never even hear what I say. All right? But I would say I don't like reform at all, but even a couple of reform MPs who won against Conservatives or Labour.
Don't even talk about immigration. I mean, this is kind of the thing. Like, you know, you're saying about are our views in the majority? Are they in the minority? Like, whatever. Like, but I mean, this is why I bring up immigration, because it's the one place where you'll always be able to gain ground on. And reform literally well, they do talk about it, but they do not talk about it much. They don't like to.
Yeah,
They
No,
try
no,
to
no,
skirt
no,
around
no,
it.
no.
And,
yeah. You know
I'll
when
tell you
Reform
what,
got a candidate
I'll
by
tell you
name
what
Splendid.
happened. What I think we should do, right, is this is what we used to say in the British Army during the Cold War, when there was a good chance of nuclear weapons landing on us, as indeed is increasing these days with the idiot stuff the West is doing to Russia. We used to say, in the British Army, you used to have a thing called an immediate action, right? So if you got a stoppage in your weapon or all sorts of things, there was an immediate action that they taught you, so you do it automatically. And we came out with an immediate action for if we saw a nuclear bomb go off. And it was, we were all going to form a circle, bend over and kiss our own ass goodbye. And if we do what all these people who say don't vote, that's where we're at. We're all bending over and kissing our ass goodbye because we got no time. And on that note, I've got to have a slash, and I'll be back in a second.
what were you going to say, Mitch, before Duke went on a little monologue there?
Well, it's like Reform. I mean, there's that one guy called Simon Dankzuk, or however you pronounce that surname, where he raised a Pakistani flag in Rochdale on Pakistani Independence Day.
Fucking hell.
And he's one of their candidates.
Good grief.
Not to mention Reform chucked out Steve Laws for calling Rishi Sunak an Indian.
Yeah, I remember that. That was particularly bad. Like, I mean, that's like, you know, that the funny thing is as well is you can look at, like, on the immigration stuff, you can actually go quite far. Like, you look at the AFD in Germany, you know, they literally came out and said, yes, we are going to deport millions. And the left over there were quite quick to scramble polling to show that the AFD had lost supporters for going mask off like that. And it showed that they've lost like 0.5%. You know, it was so minuscule. You know, generally the speaking that people are quite milk toast on immigration. They are. They're sort of against immigration, but it's sort of tangential. But you can move them. They can be moved if you do it the right way. But
Yes,
on that issue,
I
and
agree.
they could be moved slightly on other issues. But obviously, a mileage can vary considerably. But Reform are just completely unwilling to do that.
I do agree with you, and I don't like Reform and I don't like TWICE, all right? I don't. But at this stage, like, Labour will be worse, honestly. I know people don't think this after so many years of Tories, but Labour
I'm
will
of the
actually
opinion
be
of
worse.
Morgoth.
No, I'm
You can't be
sorry,
worse than
Mitch.
the
I'm
Tories at this
sorry.
point.
This is one way
Sorry?
in which AA is completely wrong, and it's his Welsh heritage, which is
What was
wrong. Because
what
Wales
was
is
Mitch's
so
what was Morgoth's stance on this?
He basically said you can't be any
I
worse
think
than the Tories at this point.
Morgoth, I often actually, I like Morgoth and I follow him on Twitter and I often repost him. Morgoth often says that Labour won't be worse, and that's the one time I always disagree with Morgoth, actually, is when he says that, because I don't think he's right. I think Labour will be at least as bad and probably worse, actually. Because this whole thing, all right, it started to some degree in 1945 under the Attlee Labour government. It then continued somewhat in the 1950s, although actually this is one thing that people like AA, who like to do these sort of talks about stuff and videos, they don't really look into. British mass third-world immigration, yes, it started in 45 under Attlee and the Labour Party. It did continue in the 1950s, but at quite low levels. I mean, you know, 1955, there were still less than 30,000 immigrants in Britain, total, the whole country. And it only really picked up hugely under Tony Blair, who Labour Party said explicitly in stuff that we can find written down, we are going to rub the British and conservative people's noses in diversity. They said it.
Well, that
Now,
was what
the Conservatives have certainly carried that on since. Yes, 100% they have. Under Cameron,
a lot of this started under John Major.
Everybody, yeah. Sorry, carry on.
I mean, a lot of this started under John Major. It was massively ramped up by Tony Blair, but John Major, you see net immigration going into the positives for the first time under John Major.
Major. Yeah, I hate it. Hate it. Always did hate it.
But he's not Labour.
His supposed love of cricket was a total con.
But he's not Labour, though.
But it won't.
Also, John Major never gets. Blair actually gets a lot of credit for this stuff, and John Major never gets any of it. A lot of the weak on crime stuff started under John Major as well. That's one of the other positions where you can really win with. That's one of the other positions you can really win with normies on. Being harsher on crime.
Get me to defend John Major, mate. You're not. I hated him. He was put up by the Conservative Party to deliberately stab Thatcher in the back when she very belatedly and far, far too late realised where the European Union was going.
Yeah, the Tories had their Blairite revolution before even the Labour Party did.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And Major was put up to stab Thatcher in the back because she suddenly realised, I don't know why it took her so long. There's a great video you can still find on YouTube called "This Skeptic Isle" by what's his name?
Hitchens.
Hitchens, yeah, Peter Hitchens, by Peter Hitchens. "This Skeptic Isle." It's a great video and explains all this stuff in great detail, more than I can possibly do on this stream, and very accurately. And Major was brought up by the Conservative establishment to stab Thatcher in the back. So
why should I care about Labour getting into power?
Because Blair doubled the immigration. Bitch, sorry, Adam. Blair doubled it. And it's gone up even more since then. And the idea that Sir Keir Starmer, who spent most of his time as head of the Crown Prosecution Services, making sure that Pakistanis and Bangladeshis did not get convicted of grooming gang crimes, is going to somehow be the savior of Britain is fucking ridiculous. And they're a uni-pie. The Labour and the Conservatives. They're a uni-pie. There's no one is saying
that no one is claiming that Labour is some saviour party. We're just saying, why should anyone give a shit about keeping them out of power when we're already stuck with the Tories right now?
Because we need to vote to try and break that two thing. Now, I don't think we can, but I'd like to see us give it a go at least. I don't think it will work, by the way, and I don't. But, one of the things that stuck with me from the military is when you're in a hopeless position, the worst thing you can do is nothing.
Well, what are the small parties you like then? Like, obviously, we've got the regulars that we've covered before, but what about this new one, the Homeland Party?
I'm not sure, man. I'm not sure about so many of them.
Started by the guy that used to run the...
The only thing I would say about all of them is that all of them need to have some sort of electoral pact. If they don't do that, then they're all wanks anyway. You've got to have so they don't run against each other because they're all going after the same vote. The pissed off Conservative vote and a few very anti-immigration Labour people. That's who they're going after, basically. All of these
I'm against electoral
parties,
pacts.
Listen, the only electoral pact I'd go for is you don't run against whatever of those smaller right of centre, air quotes, populist parties is most likely to win.
Right, but then you have to agree between you which ones get which areas, and it becomes a game of like backdoor politics, which perfectly good, viable parties could end up losing, quite easily against parties that are, much more insidious.
How many of these small parties do you know of? Because I can think of like 8, I think, maybe 9.
So,
Well, that's ridiculous. It's never going to work in a first
right,
place.
but a bunch of them are
system.
just gonna stay in obscurity, and like one is gonna rise to the top. That's how it's always been.
Except that the Labour and Conservatives will try and make sure the one that does that, like say UKIP back in the day, doesn't.
Right.
But
that's a separate fight. That's a separate struggle.
You need to understand something, Alan. It's not that I think this is going to work. I don't think it's going to work. But I think it's our kind of last, as we slip over the cliff edge, it's that last few bits of grass we might try and grab before we die. Because I think if we don't try and do that, we're just going to die. The demographics are so bad. They're so bad. They're far worse than people were saying 5 years ago.
They're not. You can recover from like 20%. Like it's all perfectly safe.
Well, I mean, it's like you
mate.
take Spain to the Reconquista. I mean, most of Spain, except the mountainous area in the north, was taken over by Muslims, but nothing stopped the Christians from overall winning.
Yeah,
it's never took
over.
a long time. It's like you take, for example,
it took a long time. It took a lot of deaths. It took a lot of stuff that I'm not sure how easy it's going to be to do in the 21st century. But not that I support violence in any way, shape, or form, of course, YouTube. But yeah, Richard Ford says 30% of kids at school aren't white. Yeah, I mean that's the stuff you got to look at. It is. But yeah, look, I'm not saying I think this is going to work. I don't think it will, but I think it's worth a try, because if we don't do this, then I don't know what the hell the fuck we're going to do.
Well, it's just like, I mean, I heard another example that you might like, Mitch, which was Kazakhstan, where they were pointing out that like Kazakhs in Kazakhstan were reduced to something like 30% of the population during the Soviet Union years, and they are recovering that quite well through various means. Not that I'm saying Kazakhstan is an example I would like to copy, but I just thought it was interesting. But yeah,
I'm not going to put this up on my stream, because Tim of Arminius is he's saying voting is not the only way. How ridiculous! I mean, I don't think you're British, Tim of Arminius, but the British population is totally disarmed.
Violent revolution isn't the only other solution either.
Exactly. There's got to be something in between.
In fact, to be honest, you could go and look at America, a heavily armed people. What have they done? Also nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Seemingly. Well, that's not entirely fair, but the thing is, I mean, Yavin. Everyone loves to hate on that guy now, but Yavin's covered this extensively. Like, it's optimistic to think that you can go up against a regime that's as strong as this, and that is so proactively keeping its boot on your neck, and think that you can pull off violent actions against it. That's simply just not how it works.
Totally agree. Persona non grata says, I increasingly believe this needs to start with a king. Well, it ain't going to be King Charles, I can tell you that much, mate. But anyway, I don't like. I don't. I left the Discord because I can't support King Charles.
Well, I mean, if you're of the Godfrey Bloom opinion that the monarchy is going to die out because of how bad King Charles is, and I don't think William is going to be much better, then there's not.
I don't know about that. I hope he might be, but you're fair enough.
Well, I mean, what do you think about William? In terms of what about him makes you think that he's going to be?
Because I'm a traditionalist and a reactionary. I hope he'll be better. Nothing makes me think he will be, but maybe he will. And he could hardly be worse than his father. That's the only thing I'll say.
I know. So I'm of the Christian opinion now. Well, we need a Cromwell type of figure rather than carry on with the king.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not
So
talking Puritans. I'm
we're
just
all
talking about
just
overall
reverting
Lord
to
Protector.
we're just reverting to our original kind of historical beliefs in that regard, I guess. But all right.
Well, I'm not talking about like, oh, we need someone like Cromwell as in the Puritans. I'm just talking about someone a little bit of Lord Protector
Yeah, no,
sort of
I
figure.
see what you're saying, mate. I do. Me, I'd bring back the Plantagenets guy myself, but yeah, I'd bring back.
But these
the
are all
Plantagenets.
what was the Mussolini line? These are all the rich son, the tired rich sons of no, the tired sons of rich men. Was it?
Yeah,
They're not made of the same
generations
metal
of
as
rich
Francis.
men. They're the tired sons of generations of rich men, and they're going to lose their empire.
Yeah.
To which I would have said to Mussolini, but not as quick as you will. But anyway.
Seems like a bit of a copy response, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I'm just being a bit snarky. But he was right. Of course he was right.
I mean that's what you need to do. You need to build a new elite that is more vitalistic than
listen, if I'd have been Chamberlain on that trip, I would have got rid of the guy from the Suez Crisis when he was Prime Minister. Anthony Eden. I would have got rid of him as Foreign Secretary because he had this hatred of the Italians I've never understood. And I would have buttered up Mussolini. I would have said, yeah, all right, mate, you and the British Empire can buddy up and be all right. Because Mussolini didn't like Adolf Babes at all. Given half an aid by the Brits, might not have even supported it. You know, when Hitler did the Anschluss with Austria, Mussolini sent Italian divisions into the Alps. So, you know, but because Anthony Eden was such a twat who didn't like Mussolini and the Italian fascists, he got all really upset about Italy taking over Ethiopia, Abyssinia as it was known there. And I'm totally convinced that an Italian government of Abyssinia would have been vastly better than Haile Selassie, but that's just me. You know, Britain and Italy had cooperated in North East Africa many times, like during the Gordon Relief Expedition and the reconquest of the Sudan by the Brits, and after the enormous Italian defeat at Adwa, which is what Mussolini was trying to revenge in the 30s. British colonists in Kenya got on very well with Italian colonists on the Italian side of the border. So yeah, I would have absolutely been mates with Mussolini in Italy, and I would have said, yeah, the British Empire and the Italian Empire can get on very well, no problems. But that's just me. And again, I will say again, I'm an Anglo-Celtic nationalist. Don't do stuff with the Americans. Don't do stuff with the Europeans. Do it for Britain. That's what all British statesmen, in my opinion, should be doing. You know, it's just 100% easy as far as I'm concerned. But whatever, you know, whatever. Some people don't see it. Like I want to do a special stream, and I think it's probably going to have to actually be two on 1895 to 1995. The British political elites first of all give away the British Empire and then give away Great Britain. But I think that's going to need to be two streams to do it any justice.
Well, more like 10 to be honest.
No, I think we could cover some of the main things.
Well, I mean, you're going to get to the Washington Naval Treaty. That's 3 streams right there. Because you were going to, you know, recover all of that again.
Nah. Maybe 3 streams in total if we make one of them. All right.
What someone really needs to talk about is the destruction of British manufacturing to deliberately keep the deliberately crushed the Northwest in sort of the 1950s and 60s. I think I might have to do that on my own channel, revive it.
I don't even disagree with you, mate. But I mean, it was a mixture of stupid socialist stuff and stupid conservative stuff, to be fair.
Mm.
I always believe what Atterman said in terms of it just being a matter of London being jealous of areas like Birmingham for being too successful. So then they just did a poison chalice on all of us.
Mate, look, I'm a Londoner, I'm a Southerner, as you guys can certainly tell by my accent. But Britain needed the industrial areas of the Midlands and the Northeast and the Northwest. We needed the mines, we needed the steelworks, we needed the shipbuilders of all these places. That's what made Britain Great Britain, you know. Yeah, sure, London had the money stuff, you know, and the, you know, the city of London. It did. But compared to that, the actual manufacturing base of Britain was overwhelmingly in the Midlands and the North, and indeed in Scotland and Wales. So you're not going to get any argument from me on that one. It was just fact. But the thing about the Washington Naval Treaty, for example, is not only did it deliberately just chuck away Britain's 3 times as many battleships as the Americans by saying, well, scrap them all. Not only did it get rid of the Anglo-Japanese naval alliance, which made, you know, the Royal Navy and the Japanese Navy together absolutely more powerful than the Americans could really hope to be, but it, at the same time, because we weren't building any battleships and not many other ships, it absolutely destroyed the British shipbuilding industry, which was able to outbuild any nation in the world prior to the end of the First World War, including America, by the way. Now, could America have ultimately overtaken Britain sometime in the 40s or the 50s? Yeah. But why should we have gifted that to them? That's what doesn't make any sense to me. So, yeah, you're not going to find an argument to me. I mean, I like the fact that, you know, Birmingham and Newcastle and Glasgow were great industrial cities that made stuff, you know, and also places like Belfast in Northern Ireland. And, you know, there were loads of places in Britain that did that. They made things. And stopping that under Thatcher, particularly, although Thatcher really only got rid of the last bits of it, a complete mistake. Complete mistake. You're never going to get me to turn around and say that wasn't an error, because it was. But yeah, I don't know. What can you say? But I still say, like, next general election, don't vote Labour, guys. Certainly don't vote.
No one's saying vote Labour, Duke. Like, no one's saying it. Like, no. All right, well, in this chat, and I will assume who's actually said vote Labour.
No, I've never seen anyone do that. I'm happy to say. But I do see people in our sphere doing so, and I don't like that.
Okay, but none of those people are in our chat or on the stream.
Who said it? Who has said it?
In our sphere,
yeah.
I really don't want to come out with particular people because some of them are
a certain brilliant academic. Put that way.
He's got me blocked anyway, so I can't see anything he says.
No, not only him, Mitch. No, not only him.
I saw
the only time I end up disagreeing with Morgoth is when he says, "Oh no, you should vote Labour." That's the only time I end up disagreeing with her.
I mean, there is something to be said, I suppose, of these like old guard leftists who kind of they've still got some underlying presuppositions that means that they can fall back into that that thing
I just
quite
don't
easily, but
think there are any left
they're so and few
inside
far
the Labour
between.
Party.
I mean, the only other person I've seen, I mean, I haven't even seen Morgoth say that. The only person I've seen is there's this guy called, I think he's called Ascended Yield on Twitter, and he's kind of I don't know how I describe his position. He's not totally one of our guys, though. He's just like 90% of the way there. And he just said, because he's quite a young guy, that he's only ever basically lived under, as long as he can remember, under the Tories, and it's shit. So he's going to vote Labour.
All I can say to this is that, as far as I'm concerned, the so-called, in air quotes, Conservatives and the so-called, in air quotes, Labour Party and the Lib Dems and certainly the Warmelon Greens, they're all one unify. There's no difference between any of those people. You vote for any of those people, you want more of the same. Vote for anyone except them. That's all I would say. I don't even care if you vote communist. Vote fucking communist rather than
I think
guys.
your time, and people can quote me on this, I think your time would be better spent by going and writing racial slurs on your ballot paper.
Yeah, I don't agree, but all right. Like I said, Adam, and you got to understand, I view the Anglo-Celtic people today. We're on the edge of the cliff, and we're starting to slip off, and we're trying to grab little bushes and bits of grass before we end up in midair and crashing to the beach. That's why I just say don't vote for that unify, which is Conservative, Labour, Lib Dems, Greens. It's one giant unify, as far as I'm concerned.
Right, but that was okay. Well, anyway, I need to head off. So
yeah, I know I'm going to cut this now because it's pissing me off as well. Because honestly, I like I said, the voting against these guys may do no good, but then how is voting against these guys is going to be worse than not voting? I don't understand that. You know, you go and vote for one of these guys, and if it doesn't do any good, how is that worse than not voting at all? Because I don't get that, you see. Hartman?
I've got nothing to add.
But I mean, if you don't vote at all, rather than you vote for whatever right-wing party you want to vote for, and none of them, as you rightly say, are really right-wing anyway, but you vote for one of these populist so-called right-wing parties, how is it worse voting for one of those guys than not voting at all? Because I can't work this out. And I have tried. I've
How
tried
is
to
it
work
worse
out.
voting for one of those guys rather than not voting at all?
Yeah.
Because the problem is you're still kind of being bought into the system. Like there's still a time and a place for voting. You know, like some places are still showing that there's something that can be won through the political solution, but by and large, the political solution could only ever work if it's supported by a non-political solution, and we need to build that first. Like the right in the UK is just completely fucking dire.
All right. Even if that's right, and I think that that's a sensible and sane point, Adam. Even if that's right, then if enough right-wing people vote for these smaller right-of-centre parties at the next general election, and it fails, and I'm pretty sure it will, by the way, that gives you more of a basis to then argue to these people, look, this ain't working, you know? That's my view, anyway. Then you can say, look, you did vote for this right-of-centre party, but it made no damn difference. We're still going down the same basically U-bend and the toilet that Britain is going down. Then you've got more of a reason to argue to these people, look, we tried it at the last election, it didn't work. And if by any chance we get, I don't know, 2 or 3 actually relatively right-wing MPs out of it who are not Conservatives, that's a tiny win as far as I'm concerned. You're
not going to get that, not for many years.
Oh, we'd be enormously lucky to get that. You're right, and certainly unless all those parties come up with some sort of electoral pact, we will not get that. Absolutely not. You know, unless these people can put their personalities and egos away enough to come up with an electoral pact, no, we won't get that. You're quite right. But then to me, you could then turn around and say, well, look, we tried this, didn't work. So, yeah, the whole democratic system is just crap. We have to do something else.
Sid
What
Precious in
exactly
chat
that something
said,
else turns out to be, I'm not sure.
Sid Precious in chat said voting is giving consent to these carpetbagging bastards.
No, I don't think it is.
There's an extent to which that is, though. Like, they will play, like Tony Blair specifically played this game where he said that, or his party at least said that the fact that no one was coming out to vote was just proof that everyone was just satisfied with the status quo. But deep down, like behind closed doors, they know that's not the case. They know that a deficit in voting attendance is room for someone to rise up and take that ground somewhere.
Portugal since Salazar.
So, yeah, but the thing is that they can successfully keep this. This is exactly the problem we're up against. It's not so much that we can't find people that would be willing to vote for a party with certain positions drawn onto a manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
It's that the powers that be successfully keep any groups from forming and keep them relatively disorganized.
Yes, they do.
I mean, you look at the way people are running around. You look at the way people were running around, like pointing Fed at every shadow, you know, and they're not wrong to do so, right? Because that is a real problem. But
yes,
the very act that's something people feel a need to worry about is part of this same sort of disorganization campaign, you could say.
Yeah, look, we're in a very, very difficult position, right? I think all of us are agreed on that. I still say at the next general election, don't vote Conservative, don't vote Labour, but do vote for one of the right of centre parties. It can't do any harm, all right? The worst that will happen is nothing will change, which is actually what I expect will happen. But then we can turn around and say to the people at the next election, look, this didn't fucking work. All right? Whereas at the moment, we can't. And the idea that Labour will... And I hear people like, I think, talking fantasy, like he does about they're going to put the woke away, which is not going to happen. I hear people like AA saying, oh, no, vote Labour because actually they'll be slightly... No, they fucking won't. And I don't believe for 1 second AA can be that stupid. I really, because you know what? I don't always agree with AA.
Hang on. Wiggle says join your local Tories and host soirees to waste money. To be fair, if you've got a small little cadre of men, absolutely do that, because if you go and attend all the meetups that they host, you're actually costing the party more than your membership covers.
Yep.
And
I totally agree with that. Wiggles is right. Atman is right. I agree with that. Waste as much Conservative Party funds as possible. Totally good. Totally agree with that. I really do. The Conservatives, like the Conservatives in air quotes, so-called Conservatives, are not conservative. Rishi Sunak is a globalist Indian banker. He's not even an Anglo-Celt. There's no way he should be Prime Minister of Britain. And even the Conservative Party membership rejected him twice.
Yeah, we've said this.
So you really
I really need to go, though. I need to shoot.
Adam, thanks for joining us. Mate, thank you for joining us. You made some good points, as you always do.
Well, we'll see.
Anything you want to plug before you leave, Adam?
No, nothing from me.
All right, man.
All right. Talk to you
Thank you
later.
for coming on. You're always most welcome. Yeah, I mean, like Rishi Sunak was rejected twice, even by the Conservative Party membership. There's no way he should be British Prime Minister, and he's not British. He'd be more chance of being Indian Prime Minister. And it ain't got anything to do with Sid Precious. I'm sorry it hasn't. I wish it did, but it hasn't. Anyway, I'm just getting more and more frustrated with this because I don't think we can win, but I also don't think we should deliberately lose by either voting Labour or not voting at all. Because, as I said, look at Portugal. Since Salazar's time, Portugal gets just over 40% of people voting at all at best. And the lefties don't give a shit. They'll just carry on doing that. But anyway, whatever.
Well, and we have much higher turnout, and they don't care either. Like we have 60.
Mitch, I totally agree with you, mate. If you think I'm not a Democrat, mate. I don't believe in democracy at all, but it's what we have, supposedly. But I don't believe in it at all. If you think I do, you're completely wrong. But anyway, anything you want to do, sure, Mitch.
Not really, unless people want to. I don't know. Like I don't know if anyone's interested in. I know my sort of autistic experiment I got doing on my Twitter as of late, where I'm just putting, oh well, this word we should have in English to replace this Latin loanword or whatever. It's just an autistic experiment, really. So it's not really anything serious.
Yeah, so you're using old English words in as opposed to modern English words that have been pinched from like Latin and Greek and what have you. Yeah, is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's like I don't know. Like, for example,
I won't say I agree with it, Mitch, but I think it's interesting. I won't say I agree with it, but I do think it's interesting.
Well, I mean, I just look at it and just go, look, I mean, if there's one thing that the enemy hates, it's when you identify yourself as Anglo-Saxon if you're an Englishman. So
True.
the more the more Anglo-Saxon you are, the more resistant to all the shit you get.
Well, I always identify myself as an Anglo-Saxon for what it's worth. There we go. All right, guys. I suppose I'll try and play this tune. We'll see if it works. I bet it don't. I can try. All right. Sorry, I'm not doing that anymore. Check you next time, boys. Go well. Don't do anything stupid.